Avatar: The Way of Water is a strange viewing experience. It is at various times throughout its considerable runtime entertaining, beautiful, exciting, boring, and frustrating. The movie is filled with excellent action, amazing CGI, very bad story decisions, and unrealised potential. It currently has a 92% audience rating on Rotten Tomatoes and a 7.3 on Metacritic. In acknowledgement of this positive audience reaction, and in fairness to the movie, I will explain what I think is good about it and why audiences have responded so positively before I get laid into it for its many and severe problems. The first thing I will say about Avatar: The Way of Water is that it has achieved something quite remarkable for a movie in 2022. It's not awful. Let's place this movie within the context of the current cinematic landscape. Here are some of the movies that were in theaters when The Way of Water was released on December 15th. Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, Strange World, She Said, and Black Adam. In previous months this year, Hollywood subjected us to, or at least attempted to subject us to, Bros, Halloween Ends, The Woman King, Don't Worry Darling, Fantastic Beasts: Secrets of Dumbledore, Jurassic World Dominion, Lightyear, Thor: Love and Thunder, and Morbius. 2022 has been an absolutely wretched year at the cinema. There has been only one really good major release, Top Gun: Maverick. All the other big releases have been varying levels of trash. So just releasing a movie that most viewers will enjoy feels like a major achievement right now. Another positive that instantly makes The Way of Water very easy to like is that it is not filled with preachy, annoying, repetitive, race and sexuality obsessed, predictable, sanctimonious, spiteful, angry, and tiresome political messaging. This movie is not a mouthpiece for the regime or a vehicle for their cherished ideology. The director clearly has too much respect for his own work to allow it to become yet another loudspeaker for an identitarian cult. And whatever you think of this movie, and whatever you think of James Cameron, you cannot deny the huge level of respect and passion that he has clearly put into making this film. The movie's most obvious positive aspect is that it looks amazing. The VFX are incredible. The world Cameron has created is gorgeous, not just in terms of the quality of the CGI, but its aesthetic artistry. The underwater scenes are clear, detailed, beautifully shot, and crisp. A lot of this movie happens at night, and it isn't the foggy, barely watchable cinematographic smog that incompetent directors of a modernist bent seem to think makes their slop look more artistic. The night scenes in Avatar: The Way of Water look superb, clear, clean, and beautiful. The CGI was clearly done with great care by FX artists working under a director who allowed them to actually create something resembling art. A very welcome change from Disney. I don't need to say anything else at this stage, just Disney. Look at the difference between this depression-inducing clip of murky, dreary puke and this. In an age when CGI is increasingly becoming an indifferent, ugly necessity rather than an elevated art form, it's important to have top-tier directors who actually want to show audiences something beautiful. There are times when Way of Water overindulges itself in long sequences that have no other purpose than to show off the visual splendor of the movie. But if ever a movie earned the right to self-indulgent displays of its visual magnificence, it's The Way of Water. Before I continue, I will just give a quick warning that this is a spoiler review. Major spoilers ahead from this point on. The movie's first act is fast-paced and to the point. Important aspects of the movie, such as Kiri being born of Grace's avatar and the Quaritch avatar and his squad being sent to hunt down Jake Sully, are explained in exposition in the opening scenes of the movie. There are no mystery boxes or big, cheesy reveals. The audience learns what they need to learn and the movie gets on with the story. In the first act, Way of Water seems almost in a hurry to get going. This movie doesn't start out at the pace of a sedated snail, it starts at a sprint. This makes it immediately engaging. Things do slow down considerably when the Sullys flee the jungle for the safety of the reefs. In fact, the pacing of the movie doesn't slow down so much as it is completely derailed. The change in pacing is so extreme that the second act of this movie, the part which takes place in the reefs prior to Quaritch's arrival there, feels like a different movie from the one we started with. A favourite criticism of Avatar, both 1 and 2, is that the main villain, Quaritch, is essentially a template villain. Just a typical good old Marine with a can-do attitude who doesn't let sentimental nonsense like morals get in the way of the mission. Quaritch is two-dimensional, but this fits perfectly with the goals of the corporation running the mining operation on Pandora. Quaritch is exactly the man you want as the head of security if you are a corporation sending out an expedition to pillage a precious metal from a planet 4 light years from Earth that is inhabited by big blue aliens who could render your human resources unprofitable. A man who is smart but not too smart, lest he begin to develop ideas of his own, something major corporations do not want anyone doing, employee or consumer. Ruthless but not insane, aggressive, very capable, experienced, alpha, and relatively absent intellectual curiosity, which Quaritch is, as indicated by his referring to scientists as
bunch of limp-dick science majors.
Quaritch makes perfect sense in world because he is two-dimensional. The character is also played excellently by Stephen Lang. I enjoyed the character in the first movie and I enjoy him here. Not every villain needs to be Hannibal Lecter. In The Way of Water, an attempt is made, and I think successfully, to give Quaritch's character more depth by having him meet his son on Pandora. I like the idea of Quaritch having a son, but I just wish the character was better. Spider is impressively annoying. He is a child raised by scientists who spends a lot of time with the Na'vi. He should be intelligent and interesting. Instead, he is moronic and boring. His main motivation, as far as I can tell, is to be Na'vi, something which is impossible for him and therefore not a compelling reason for any of his actions and decisions. I'll expand more on my criticisms of Spider in the bad stuff section of this video. Way of Water has great action and fight scenes, and there are plenty of both. It does slow down a lot in the second act, which focuses heavily on the Sully children, during which I did get very bored at times. This was an unwelcome come down from the excitement of the first act. From the end of the second act, the pacing picks up speed and then goes into overdrive into a huge crescendo in Act 3, involving constant action, explosions, combat, Na'vi, humans, even whales get in on the action at the end. And even after the action is over, the aftermath is also very compelling. The emotional build-up to the battle sequence, the battle itself, the final showdown between Jake Sully and Quaritch, and the Sully family working together to escape the sinking ship is signature James Cameron. These dramatic beats are familiar to anyone who has seen his other work, but it's a formula that works and sells movie tickets. The fight choreography is excellent. At the end of the movie, Sully is fighting the final boss, Quaritch. The fight starts out on the boat. It's frantic, flashy, well shot and well acted. The fight then moves underwater where they engage in grappling. It looks like MMA underwater and is very entertaining. The final boss fight is excellently filmed. It's crisp, clear, there's no excessive blur or murkiness or shaky cam or pretentious angles. It is very well shot. After seeing dross like this, and the profound disappointment of the rematch of the century, I will never again take good fight choreography for granted, and the fights at the end of this movie are great examples of fight choreography done well. The Way of Water's fundamentals are almost all there. The movie is well directed, looks great, has fantastic action, good set-piece battles, great sound, good music, not excellent, but a good score, which draws heavily from the late great James Horner's original score. And the acting is very good, even the child actors, except for the kid who plays Spider, who was awful. The dialogue was forgettable and serviceable, not offensively bad as some have accused it of being, though this script would benefit significantly from the removal of the words cuz and bro. I even really enjoyed some of the cheesier lines, a favourite coming from an exchange between the general leading the human military expedition and the Quaritch avatar. I have had to reconstruct this scene myself to avoid any copyright complications, and while my rendering of it is perhaps not quite as flashy as the scene in the movie, I think I did a pretty good job.
Colonel, we believe your blue team will be perceived as indigenous, and will not trigger the immune response.
And how might we test that hypothesis, General?
The hard way.
Outstanding.
The movie also succeeds in getting you emotionally invested in the characters. When Jake Sully's firstborn son dies near the end, you actually care. If not for the boy himself, since we don't get to know him or like him all that much in the movie, then at least for his family, who are there at his death. This is a character death that has genuine impact on the viewer, as opposed to almost everything else I have seen this year. Oh no, my favourite angry, loud, annoying, psychopathic, uninvited guest has been murdered. What an emotional hammer blow.
Golly gee, a single tear rolls down my cheek.
Oh, for God's sake, would you ever go away, you insufferable cunt? The death of Sully's son made me feel genuinely bad for Jake and Neytiri. This character death also shows that the plot armor that protects Jake has not been inherited by all of his children, and the Neytiri animation and visuals on display in the battle scene following her son's death are incredible. It is the best rendering of human emotion on a CGI face that I have ever seen, and Zoe Saldana's acting in that scene is also pretty damn good. The entire Neytiri Goes Wild sequence is James Cameron at his best. Just brilliant action. Let's move on now to one of my favourite aspects of The Way of Water.
The Mantids.
The humans. The humans are cartoonishly one-dimensional and evil in this movie. They are continuing on their destruction of the natural paradise that is Pandora, but this time on a much more massive scale than in the first movie. This is exactly why I like them and root for them, because they are trying their best to destroy the straw man utopia that James Cameron has created as a light contrast to what he perceives as the dark world created by man. The Way of Water's humans are not the kid glove wearing, public image conscious, weak bellied, squeamish corporate types incapable of seeing anything beyond the end of quarter report as they were in the first movie. Now they are brutal, ruthless conquerors, and they're on Pandora to stay. In the previous movie, the humans operated under the pretense of being a benevolent force.
We tried to give them medicine, education, roads.
That has been dispensed with. Now humans are just an evil, invasive alien species. The humans in The Way of Water remind me of the Mantids from Turok 2, Seeds of Evil.
The Hive of the Mantids. The Mantids are an aggressive and extremely intelligent race of insects that have established a large colony in the Lost Land in recent years. The Mantids are incapable of pity, remorse, or kindness. They exist solely to further their own existence. To this end, the Primogen has persuaded the Mantids to help free him by promising to give them ripe new worlds to infest. The first world on their list is Earth.
Collectively, humans seem to be absent any sort of moral reasoning and have become a kind of interstellar virus that exists simply to infect other planets and replicate itself.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet, or a plague.
While the previous leader of the humans on Pandora was a corporate suit interested only in making money, a man of no vision who viewed the Na'vi as a distraction to be ignored or brushed aside, now the leader is a military officer, a general who has been sent there to take control. She does not view the Na'vi as a nuisance to be bought off, but as a target to be smashed, and she is taking a very long-term view. She views Pandora as humanity's new home, and her prerogative is to make the planet safe for humans by destroying the native insurgency. We don't learn much about this character, and frankly, she's just another two-dimensional military type. But, as with Quaritch, this does make sense. I would guess that the power behind the massive force that showed up to Pandora was a combination of corporate interests and the American government, which, by 2170, the year this movie is set in, will almost certainly have combined to form a single, corrupt, incestuous, evil power blob, assuming it isn't that already. Such a corrupt, amoral power would want to send a two-dimensional leader to head human expansion efforts. They wouldn't want a leader who's going to ask questions, have moral reservations, or get ideas of his own. They want a good soldier who acts in accordance with instructions and gets the job done. If you're trying to conquer Pandora, you don't want George Washington, you want George Patton. The fact is, the battle for Pandora has started, and, for the Na'vi, it's essentially win or be conquered. This movie has been criticised for making the humans so one-dimensionally evil, and this is a valid criticism. The portrayal of the humans is simplistic, unrealistic, and frankly ridiculous. But there are very good reasons for this choice. Portraying the humans as evil invaders makes the new political reality clear, so the movie doesn't have to waste time showing humans argue with each other as they try to figure out the nature of their presence on Pandora and how to deal with the Na'vi. This frees up screen time and avoids a moral conflict within the human settlement, which prevents The Way of Water from repeating a central plotline from Avatar, the internal debate about how to treat the Na'vi and what humanity's role on Pandora should be. If James Cameron chose to focus a lot of the movie on the human question, why are they on this planet and how should they behave toward the natives, we would end up with a more complex and realistic movie, and certainly a movie which I would much rather watch, but it would become a movie about humans, not about the Na'vi, and a movie about the Na'vi is what the audience is paying for. This is a sci-fi fantasy with big blue aliens as the main attraction after all. By making the humans the one-note bad guys and allowing the movie to move on to world building, or at least what James Cameron thinks is world building, and letting the audience spend time with the big blue pretty aliens, Cameron is giving the audience what they want. And judging by the audience reaction to this movie, surface level world building and big, blue, pretty aliens is indeed what Jill and Joe Popcorn want to see. And we have to give Cameron credit for pleasing his audience. Over the past few years, and especially in 2022, major studios, Disney in particular, have gone out of their way to impose upon audiences that which they don't want. Movies no one wanted to see, characters no one asked for, casting choices made with the explicit aim of generating negative attention and making divisive political statements. Scenes designed to elicit disgust in the viewer, vast amounts of screen time devoted to aspects of a character's private life that no one cares about, entire shows in which the angering and mocking of viewers is an explicitly stated central goal of the showrunners. We live in an age when a fan base fears Hollywood adapting their beloved franchise because they know that the franchise will be just another slab of content thrown on the conveyor belt and fed through the intersectionalizer.
Good afternoon, Karen. I am so pleased that this studio has chosen to adapt my best-selling fantasy trilogy into a streaming series, and congratulations on being chosen as showrunner. I understand that you would like to make some changes to my work in order to ensure that it will be well received by a modern audience. Please let me know what changes you had in mind.
You better get used to it. You better get used to it.
Coming out the other end, a mangled, propagandized, unrecognizable mess. A recent example of Hollywood refusing to give the fans what they want and instead giving them the middle finger is the dropping of Henry Cavill as Superman, an actor everyone wanted to see as Superman. But instead of the nerd-chad Superman that everyone wanted, Hollywood will be giving us a much younger and no doubt considerably more intersectional version of Superman that a grand total of 0 fans asked for. So when a major franchise just gives the audience what they want, not what the regime believes they should want, not what the audience would want if only their ossified brains were sufficiently updated to recognize the greatness of modern content. When a director gives the audiences what they actually want, he should be applauded for it. And what the audience wants is big, blue, pretty aliens, not humans arguing about the moral philosophy of interstellar colonization and trying to overcome the mutual incompatibility of human expansion and the Na'vi way of life. I could be wrong on this point, but unfortunately, I don't think I am. Would audiences, and I do mean $2 billion worth of audiences, go for a more realistic, morally complex story in Avatar? I doubt it, but do let me know your thoughts in the comments. The antagonistic role the humans play in this movie is communicated as soon as they arrive on the planet. As the first humans touch down, they burn a gigantic section of forest with their jet engines to make a clearing for the new human settlement. I have to say, I thought this part of the movie was absolutely glorious. One of the best parts. It looked gorgeous. The way the flames erupt through the jungle as animals flee before it, like a tidal wave from hell, annihilating everything it touches. It was beautiful.
We don't need no water, let the motherfucker burn.
Seriously, I wanted to stand up and applaud whoever was commanding that vessel for his sheer ruthlessness. When I was in the theatre, I thought, yes, this is what progress looks like. A paradise jungle turned into a scene from Dante's Inferno. Construction machines that look like metal behemoths raised from the bowels of hell. Black smoke, dead trees, animals burned to a crisp. Civilization has arrived on Pandora, and I fucking love it. Light it up, boys. And the city the humans build, just look at that industrial abomination. That has to be the ugliest urban space ever created. It's like something from a modernist architect's wet dream. A gigantic, flat, grey cement slab scarred with rows of huge, brutalist abominations, reminiscent of those god-forsaken new cities Arab oil billionaires and corrupt governments keep building in the Middle East. The city bears the not particularly poetic name Bridgehead City, named after the military term which describes an initial incursion into enemy territory from which a larger scale invasion can be mounted, just in case the audience didn't get the message that the humans are the evil invading colonists fully intent on conquering this planet and plundering it until it too goes the way of the dying Earth.
Ripe new worlds to infest.
Unfortunately, we learn absolutely nothing about this city. We learn that it exists and that's it. We don't know who lives there or why they live there. We don't know what people here eat, what they do for work, what their long-term aspirations are, why they left Earth, what their day-to-day lives look like, what kind of culture they're developing in the city. Nothing. We don't learn a single name of a single person in that city. James Cameron wants the audience to view humanity on Pandora not as a collective of individuals, but as a big cancerous growth on the surface of the planet. An infestation on this ripe new world. This is a shame because a good writer could really have sunk his teeth into a city on Pandora. Perhaps the majority of the inhabitants are wealthy elites who were rich enough to pay for a ticket off Earth before the air becomes unbreathable. Perhaps they are the genetically fittest individuals, chosen by the power blob that controls the whole operation. Or maybe it's just anyone stupid and optimistic enough to believe that there is a future for humanity on a planet where they literally can't breathe the air. Unfortunately, the city is left entirely unexplored and is just one instance of the Way of Water's lost potential. The city could also have been an opportunity for James Cameron to expand his themes. One of Avatar's biggest problems are the sophomoric themes. Man bad, trees good. Modern society bad, ancient society good. A genuinely insightful and impactful political theme could have been developed if Cameron had depicted life in his urban monstrosity as akin to what many people are experiencing today and will be experiencing a lot more of in the future. Rent serfdom, the impossibility of ever owning anything of real value and being told to be happy about it, everything being a subscription, social credit scores, carbon credits, travel rations, earning what you're told is a decent wage but being broke at the end of every month, being expected to live in a pod and eat soybean and bug paste by people that live in mansions, travel on private jets and eat $100 steaks, getting demoralized by the brutalist horror that surrounds you every time you leave your cement living unit. These are all messages people today would understand and identify with, but instead we get talk to trees and save the whales. I understand that to go with the more meaningful, complex and relatable themes would have made this movie much more about the human inhabitants of Bridgehead City and much less a teen drama taking place in a beach resort, but personally, that is a trade-off I would be willing to make. Much more on this movie's themes later in the video. Now, I don't like Jake Sully in the original Avatar. I think he's a traitor and a selfish butcher, but in The Way of Water, he is a far more sympathetic figure. He's still a traitor for sure, but his decision was made, and for better or worse, he's Na'vi now, and he has to play for the side he's picked. He's admirable as the brave leader of a resistance who fight against the evil manted colonization efforts, the light opposite of those who seek to update Pandora for a modern audience, to destroy that which is natural and beautiful and replace it with that which is unnatural and ugly. This makes it very easy to like him. He is also a father now. He has 4 kids, including one child he has adopted, and he rules over his family as a benevolent patriarch. He is a traditional father who wants the best for his family. The inclusion of a traditional strong father in a major production in current year is astonishing. This goes against everything Hollywood stands for. Jake Sully is a loving, present, strong, authoritative father. He's not an absentee loser. He's not a runaway coward who abandons his family. He's not a wimp who just agrees with everything his wife says and does everything she tells him. He's not a broken version of the heroic man who is constantly asked to justify himself by the smarter, wittier women around him. He's not a deconstructed man. He's a real man. He's a classical male hero. And whatever you think of Jake Sully as a character, or James Cameron's sixth form political views, or even of Avatar as a franchise, it is great to be able to go to the cinema and watch a movie that just lets the male hero be a man, without having him humiliated in some way, or at the very least upstaged by the women around him. It is extremely refreshing to see this kind of family-friendly entertainment on a big screen, a movie which celebrates the life-giving beauty of the traditional family, instead of denigrating the nuclear family and celebrating sterility. Way of Water is also free of tiresome current year political messaging. It does, of course, contain environmental and anti-colonialist themes, which we will get to, but it doesn't at any point suffocate the story, characters, and viewing experience by inserting political messages that are currently fashionable among the wealthy and powerful. This is not anti-family hell garbage like Strange World, and ultra-feminist, racialist slop like Wakanda Forever. The Way of Water is an actually enjoyable viewing experience, not a 3-hour-long feminism lecture disguised as a movie. The scenes with the teen kids, while tedious, could be worse. This is because the kids are usually doing something when they're with each other. In one scene, the two brothers argue while taking part in an ambush. In another, Jake Sully's kids argue and fight with some reef kids. In another, the reef bullies take Jake Sully's son off, ostensibly to go fishing, though the audience knows that they have something evil planned. The entire final act involves the kids quite a lot, but it's mostly action, including not one but two hostage situations. James Cameron seems, mercifully, to be aware of the fact that teens sitting around talking vapid shit does not make for compelling viewing, as Netflix's Resident Evil recently reminded us.
You can drop that bitch act. Not an act. Do you think I want to be here? Don't you? I mean, you were fine with moving. I didn't have a choice. What was I supposed to do? Yell and scream and break a place? What happened to the chick that stole that beer? She almost got expelled. She got fucking boring.
That said, I was bored to death by the Free Willy subplot, which I will discuss a lot more later. Another positive that keeps the kid scenes from being utter tripe is that the children playing the Na'vi kids all deliver good performances. One of the biggest dangers of having kids in a movie is that inexperienced child actors are generally terrible, but the excellent casting and directing ensured that they all turned in solid performances, with the notable exception of the kid that played Spider. For the teen daughter Kiri, Cameron took no chances and just had Sigourney Weaver play the role. Yes, this movie features a 70-year-old Sigourney Weaver playing an adolescent Na'vi. That was, again, a good decision. Weaver's performance is very convincing and obviously considerably better than anything a child actor could have produced. And using Sigourney Weaver in the role also allowed Kiri to have a resemblance to her mother, a small but important detail. I also think the decision to have a child that came from Dr. Augustine's avatar was a realistic one. Give an attractive young blue Na'vi avatar to an older woman who probably isn't getting as much action as she once did. Drop her into a village full of shredded, high-tea aliens straight out of a sci-fi romance novel. And place your bets on how long it is before she disappears into the trees with a lanky blue Chad. My money's on 20 minutes. Same goes for Courage having a son. He's an older but still vigorous and clearly alpha guy. You seriously gonna tell me that after he personally takes control of the Pandora base through sheer force of personality and gives this speech?
We will blast a crater in their racial memory so deep that they won't come within 1,000 clicks of this place ever again. And that, too, is a fact.
That some lonely scientist used to being around pudgy lab geeks isn't going to pull him into a closet first chance she gets? By the way, if we find out in the next Avatar movie that Kiri is conceived of Ehwa or some other such religious allegory nonsense, just no, alright, no. Kiri is the result of Dr. Augustine indulging herself in a long-held fantasy with a big blue sex beast. She was impregnated by a bloodthirsty Na'vi warrior, not a tree. Now I'm going to focus on The Way of Water's problems, and I do have a lot of severe criticisms of this movie. In the first major action scene of the movie, the Na'vi, led by Jake Sully, attack a train carrying military supplies. The scene looks amazing, it's exciting and has great action. It's also an important scene in establishing the emotional relationship between Sully and his sons. It also makes no sense. The humans wouldn't build a railway through a jungle in the middle of a war with insurgents. They would be much more likely to transport their supplies by air, or if that was a problem because the Na'vi do have air assets, build a road. A road would be much cheaper and easier to defend, maintain, and, following the inevitable attacks by the insurgents, repair, than a railway built through a jungle. Also, where were these weapons going? There's only one major city on Pandora. No other human outpost would be so big as to require a train to supply it. The only reason to even build a train would be to transport mineral wealth plundered from a mine back to the city. But this train is full of weapons, not raw materials. So why does this train exist and where was it going? The answer is, of course, it exists so Jake Sully can attack it, and it wasn't going anywhere because the script only needed it for this one scene. But it is still a good scene when viewed in isolation of the movie and any attempt at critical thinking. And even if you did have a train, why don't these weapons and crates have trackers on them? I'm no expert in anti-insurgent tactics, but it seems to me that if local insurgents are stealing your weapons to use against you, you should place basic, cheap, off-the-shelf trackers on those weapons. The insurgents will reveal the location of their base and you can bomb them out of existence in minutes. End of insurgency. But apparently, nobody qualified enough to go on a light-years-long journey to conquer an entire planet thought to do this. Also worth pointing out during the train attack is that the music is very triumphant and upbeat as the humans are slaughtered by the Na'vi. We're watching some poor bastard get an arrow through the chest for the crime of doing his job, and the music tells us to celebrate it. Another minor plot hole in this scene is that, well over a decade after the defeat of the initial human presence on Pandora, the combat aircraft still have windows so weak that they can be penetrated by a single arrow. You would think that these multi-million-dollar military assets would have had their windows upgraded so that the entire ship can't be destroyed with a stick. And it's not like this would be hard to do. Way of Water is set around 2170. This is what commercial car windows can withstand today. But you're telling me that a military-grade aircraft built 150 years later and 15 years after the design flaw in the windows was exposed can be shattered with a pointy stick? Right, now let's talk about no one's favourite character, Spider. He is a supremely annoying character. Now, I will be fair, he's not Jar Jar Binks annoying, but the actor is terrible, easily the weakest in the movie. Look no further than the faces he makes at the TV monitor during the whale hunt for evidence of this. He pulls these really cringy amateur actor faces. It's quite hard to watch. Spider talks like a stoner kid and says, bro, dude, and cuss a lot. By the way, if he was a stoner kid, that would have been far better. Like he smokes a local hallucinogenic plant that he's discovered and given the name Spider Kiss. He lights up, inhales, then puts his mask back on so he can rebreathe the smoke and max out on a single toke. After the kids escape from the Quaritch squad, Spider lights up to take the edge off, but he overdoes it. And when the kids decide to make a run for it, Spider's so fucking baked he just collapses. And that's how Quaritch captures him. And a recurring plot point is that Spider's not sure if the Quaritch avatar is really his father's avatar or a Spider Kiss-induced hallucination. James Cameron could have sold a legal weed product with the brand name Spider Kiss and made a fortune. Why wasn't I hired to work on this script? James Cameron, don't release the next movie without me. By the way, Spider Kiss is a great novel. Read it if you get the chance. Despite not being everything he could, Spider does provide a convenient function in the script. He helps the Quaritch avatar and his squad integrate into Pandora. He provides a sense of scale that reminds the audience of just how big and alien the Na'vi are, which is easy to forget since most of the movie is just Na'vi. The one positive about Spider is that his presence in the movie allows Quaritch to develop into a more complex character with a greater level of emotional depth. James Cameron obviously knew that Quaritch is not a complex and interesting enough villain to feature as a main protagonist again in this movie and again in the next movie and possibly even the movie after that. And I do think that Quaritch became a more interesting, less predictable villain as a result of his building a relationship with Spider. This changes Quaritch's motivation and gives Sully something he can threaten Quaritch with, something Quaritch fears, the death of his son. It also makes Quaritch a less ruthless, more human villain, which is satisfyingly ironic given the fact that he is now a Na'vi. And I am aware that Spider was almost certainly retconned into the franchise after the first movie because of the popularity of Stephen Lang's Quaritch, but I don't think this is a problem since it doesn't create any plot holes because it's easily explained. Quaritch was doing some damage while on base in the first movie. The single biggest problem with Quaritch in Way of Water is that he doesn't kill Jake Sully when he has a clear shot at him. His only mission objective, his sole function at this point in time, is to kill Jake Sully, and he chooses not to. The script's excuse for this is that he doesn't want to provoke the stick-wielding Na'vi into attacking the boat. This is the single most important decision he takes in the movie, and it is entirely inconsistent with his character and past actions. This is the same guy who bombed Hometree and didn't worry about what the Na'vi response might be. He led an entire army to wipe out a Na'vi army, realizing correctly that not to do so would be worse, since it would allow the Na'vi time to build up a massive army that could overrun the human base. The same man that carried out these actions is now going to hold fire against the single most dangerous Na'vi on Pandora because it might provoke a band of spear-wielding savages into attacking an armed boat loaded with mechs and machine guns. It's nonsense. Another problem with Spider is that, although he is raised by scientists in a lab, he runs around like a feral savage and imitates the Na'vi as completely as he possibly can. There is no indication that the scientists have even attempted to educate him. Can he even read? What is he good at? What is he interested in? Spider would be a much more compelling character if, for example, we see him teaching Na'vi children how to read in a few scenes, and he ends up arguing with a Na'vi mother who objects to this aspect of human culture. Spider could perhaps defend the practice of reading, saying that the kids like the stories he reads and not everything about human culture is bad. Instead, we get a discount Mowgli with very little character. Another thing I found annoying about Spider is that he constantly bares his teeth and hisses like a bad actor in a cheap vampire movie. And how does he eat and drink when he's with the Na'vi? He would have had to take off his mask and very deliberately not breathe while eating, which is almost impossible, or he would have to put his mask on in between feeding himself bites of food, which again is not practical and is only a minor slip-up away from causing a fatal accident. And if this guy gets food poisoning from the wild meat and fruit he's constantly eating, he's going to have a hard time trying to hold his breath while projectile vomiting. And what if his mask breaks or cracks or is infected with a fungal bacteria? The scene on the bridge when Spider attacks the pilot and crashes the ship is absurd. This attack takes place after he has run onto the deck in an attempt to help the Na'vi hostages. He has already shown himself to be a loose cannon, sympathetic to the Na'vi, to say nothing of his Na'vi chic fashion choices. Why have the crew taken him back to the bridge entirely unrestrained and unsupervised after he has attempted to help the enemy? Did it not occur to anyone that maybe this strangely attired wild kid shouldn't be 5 feet from the ship's central control system? And sure enough, he smashes the pilot's head in with a fire extinguisher, then rams the craft into a reef. This is just murder. I don't care how many whales this crew killed, you can't just bash some guy's head in with a fire extinguisher. And later on, we see the crew treat him with kid gloves again, telling him, "Please put your mask on correctly, sir, we have to get you to the boat safely." These cunts are worse than the British police. Close down a motorway and they'll ask you if you want any tea and biscuits while you're deciding whether or not to let an ambulance past. But these whaling idiots, I think maybe they've been smoking some Spider Kiss. It's the only reasonable explanation for their stupidity. Spider's arc is also very unsatisfying. I could have forgiven his presence in the movie if at the end he had accepted the fact that he is not Na'vi, can never be Na'vi, can't even breathe the planet's air, and as Neytiri very clearly demonstrated by slashing him across the chest and holding a knife to his throat, will never be accepted into Na'vi society. In fact, he will increasingly be otherized and despised by the Na'vi as the human presence on Pandora increases, the war intensifies, and the bodies really start to pile up. But he's too dumb and stubborn to see this, and so he runs back to the Na'vi to resume his role as their loyal little pet human. And this choice is incompatible with the choice he made 5 minutes earlier to save Quaritch's life. If you want to embrace your humanity, save Quaritch and go with him. If you want to side with the Na'vi, let Quaritch die. And don't tell me he saved Quaritch because he was compelled to do so by an attack of compassion. The kid just helped to kill an entire boatload of people who posed no threat to him. He does not strike me as an especially compassionate character. James Cameron's choice to have Spider side with the Na'vi is a missed opportunity. Spider could have been an interesting character in the next movie, a human who sided with his own not because he particularly wanted to, but because he realized that he has no choice. Whether he likes it or not, he has no place in the Na'vi world because it's not his world. The human world is where he belongs, but he will resent that and will still feel a lot of sympathy for the Na'vi. Maybe he'll seduce a lonely geneticist who goes mad for his whole Tarzan Chad thing and have her make him his own avatar, which he then takes to the Na'vi so he can properly become one of them. There's a lot of good possibilities for Spider if he makes the right choice at the end of the movie and goes with his father's avatar. But instead, the movie has him make the lazy, emotionally pleasing but dramatically unsatisfying choice of pretending to be something he isn't. This also prevents Spider from having any sort of character arc. At the end of his journey, he is still a deluded feral child. He has learned nothing. Also, his moral compass is just broken. In one scene, he goes into histrionics over a few easily repaired beach huts being torched, as if he has Mother Teresa levels of compassion. And a few scenes later, he's a fire extinguisher-wielding murderer. Either the Spider Kiss is playing tricks on his brain, or he's a poorly written character with inconsistent motivations and emotional reactions. We'll move on now to what is easily the worst thing in this movie. The whales and everything to do with them. Not being satisfied with turning humans into paradise-destroying evil alien colonists,
The Mantids.
James Cameron has also turned us into brain-eating zombies. In the first movie, the ravenous humans were motivated by unobtainium, a precious metal found only on Pandora. The loot in this movie isn't unobtainium anymore. It is a golden liquid pillaged from the brains of dead whales which stops aging in humans. Just stops it, as Ozzy Ahab says. I like him, by the way. He's a good character. Man just wants to get the job done and get paid. But unfortunately, this plot device makes no sense, because how do humans know about this elixir of life? Imagine going to work in a mine and one day you're having lunch in the cafeteria when a guy, we'll just call him Doug Freck, bursts in, proudly holds aloft a vial of creamy looking substance and declares, "Lads, I've discovered that Doug can regrows hair where you've gone bald." Your first thought would be, Doug, how did you discover this? By the way, I think I'm going to be referring to this brain nectar as brainobtainium. Other names I've thought of were whaleobtainium, unobwhalium, whaleobbrainium, and brainobwhalium. Actually, that last one's better. Let's go with that. How exactly did humans find out that the liquid found inside the brain of some obscure ocean species on a planet teeming with millions of new and undiscovered species stopped aging? Was some random human out fishing one day, caught a whale, decided to drill into its head because what else are you going to do on a Sunday afternoon? And then a pissy looking substance popped out and he thought to himself, "Ooh, that looks yummy," then lapped it off the bloody whale carcass, only to discover seconds later that, oh my god, I've stopped aging. Forget about how Brain of Whalium was obtained in the first place. How would humans ever find out that it stops aging? Someone would have to consume a sufficient quantity of Brain of Whalium, then notice its effects. In fact, several people would have to do this for it to be confirmed, and that would take a long time. A brain whale would have to be transported back to Earth, which takes 6 years. The brain nectar sold to some Chinese billionaire who wants to show off by drinking it in his tea. Then he would have to report the effects, which he realistically probably wouldn't notice for, we'll say 8 years, maybe more, before he and those around him noticed that something weird is going on. They would then have to trace his aging pause back to the Brain of Whalium and check with other people who consumed it. That's about 15 years before humans even set out for Pandora to get more of this stuff. With the additional 6 years it takes to get there, it would be over 20 years after the first movie before the whalers arrived at the earliest. Now, once Brain of Whalium was confirmed to be the font of youth, then shit would hit the fan. Every single wealthy, elitist wanker on the planet would want it. Probably they would form a corporation which would send out a giant army of absurdly well-paid whalers to Pandora. There would almost certainly be competing corporations from every major power on Earth who would be unlikely to cooperate with each other, given the sheer value of the resource thereafter. This wouldn't be the civilized whale hunt you see in this film. It would be an all-out scramble for Brain of Whalium. It would be apocalyptic. Those whales wouldn't last a week when the corporation ships landed on Pandora, and there would likely be battles fought over hunting grounds between the whaling corporations. And when they brought that shit back to Earth, you know that wanker elitists would take it, then once they had their immortality, form charities to stop the evil whalers, and fly private jets around the planet to collect awards for their conservation efforts, and make speeches vilifying the public for wanting Brain of Whalium, then attend super high-end parties afterwards where they eat Pandora whale. You know that's what would happen. The Brain of Whalium plot device was a total fail for me, and easily the worst aspect of this movie. It's utterly absurd. Obviously, Cameron wanted to show off these whales and have them be an important part of the movie, but he should have thought of a better reason to have them in the movie than the Brain of Whalium plot device. And honestly, these whale things are just a big, stupid, ugly thorn in this movie's face. The movie would be far better if James Cameron had just let go of this entire stupid whale subplot. This is almost certainly an example of the Jar Jar Binks effect. A director has an awful idea that he thinks is really cool, and as a result of his status and past successes, no one around him has the balls to tell him, no, this is dumb. We're not going to bring an action war movie about aliens versus human colonists to a crashing halt so we can have a whale documentary in the middle of the movie. Now put down the spider kiss and write a proper fucking script. Jake Sully's flight also doesn't make much sense. He's the leader of the resistance, but then he discovers, big shock, the humans want him dead and his family is in danger, so he must abandon the war and flee. But Of course his family's in danger. They're participating in an existential war against a massive human presence. If Jake Sully didn't want his kids to be in danger, maybe he could have moved them out of the war zone before he started leading attacks against military targets with his wife and sons in tow. The movie explains this away by upping the stakes. He's not just fighting a war, he is now the target of an experienced hunter-killer guerrilla squad led by the Quaritch Avatar. But by running away from Quaritch, Sully is simply leaving someone else to clean up his mess. His decision is also explained as an altruistic choice. He leaves the insurgency because his presence within the insurgency puts the people in danger, since the humans have Spider now, and Spider knows everything and can lead the humans to the insurgent base. So move! Tell everyone to pack up the supplies, weapons, and whatever they can safely carry, and move the base. This is standard practice for any insurgency, but Sully doesn't even consider this option. This strategic ineptitude is consistent with his character though. In the first Avatar movie, Jake Sully orders a frontal cavalry attack against a line of mechs armed with super machine guns, resulting in the total loss of his ground force. Frontal cavalry charges against infantry were obsolete by the time of the American Civil War, but Jake, an experienced soldier, was somehow unaware of this and seemingly is ignorant of the tactic of moving your base when your enemy is likely about to discover its location. What's more surprising than Sully not even thinking to relocate the insurgency is that no one else does. How can an insurgency be smart enough to plan and execute well-coordinated ambushes, but stupid enough to be unfamiliar with the concept of a tactical retreat? The far more realistic response to the Quaritch Avatar, and the one much more consistent with Jake Sully's character as a brave warrior, would be to send his family somewhere safe but probably not too far away, then take 6 or 7 of his best men, enough to be effective but not enough to get noticed, and go hunt down Quaritch. But if that happened, the movie wouldn't be able to turn into a nature documentary about whale reefs. So Jake Sully puts someone else in charge of the war and flees with his family instead. Now, to the movie's credit, it does point to the big blue elephant in the room. Ronal, the Metkayina chief's wife, chastises Jake Sully for running from the war, and basically calls him a coward. I suppose you could argue that Jake Sully's flight was motivated by his fear for his family, and he isn't a very forward-thinking or intelligent man, so while I don't think Sully's flight is believable, it is at least within the realm of believability. And I do like the fact that the central plot of this movie is a man trying to keep his family safe during a war. If this was a Disney movie, Jake would react to the news of Quaritch targeting him by formulating some absurdly stupid plan of action that would, of course, be opposed by the much smarter and more capable Neytiri. He would ignore her and proceed with his plan, a frontal assault against Bridgehead City or something equally stupid. He'd be killed, Neytiri would take over the movie and, of course, the franchise. Then she would head out into the jungle and eventually kill the entire Quaritch squad single-handed, and I'm not even kidding. That is almost certainly what Disney would have done if they were making this movie. And yes, I am aware that Disney produced and distributed this film, but they had no creative influence, thank God. One of the main problems with Way of Water is that there's just too much water.
Too many notes.
I'm specifically referring to the long, often patience-shredding scenes involving Son Number 2 and Free Willy. These happen after the movie has already slowed down considerably following the Sully's arrival at the reefs. If you like whale movies and long, relaxing episodes of Blue Planet, you'll like the Free Willy scenes. If, like me, you don't care about whales,
nuke the whales,
and would prefer to spend the $125 that it costs to go to the movies these days on a movie and not a nature documentary about four-eyed whales, you will like this portion of the movie. A particularly stupid whale nonsensicalism is that they are an intelligent species and have given up killing completely because killing is bad. Even when it's justified, it's still bad. So they don't kill each other and they don't kill any other intelligent species. Although this was a collective political decision, it is obeyed by all individual whales, even unto the point of death and the death of one's child, which also doesn't make any sense. This species may be, as we learn in the movie, smarter than humans, but they're really fucking dumb. If a group of hunters are trying to kill you and your children, you don't swim away, you turn around and attack them, Moby Dick style. I've felt absolutely nothing for the whales. Even when Aussie Ahab and the crew kill one of them and dump its body, I just thought, well, that was mean, I guess. The advantage of the Na'vi is that it's easy to identify with them because they are humanoid, but the whales are whales? I just don't care about their plight. If Cameron wanted to introduce a new intelligent species with the power of language as part of Pandora's world building, because apparently the one he had already established wasn't enough, there are many far better choices than whale stand-ins. The whales were easily the worst part of this movie, to the point that I would say I enjoyed the movie in spite of them. Let's move on now to what I call the Na'vi problem. That is, the Na'vi aren't really aliens, they're humans. More specifically, they're modern humans who live in sanitized primitive conditions. The emotional range of the Na'vi is identical to humans. They are at various times happy, sad, amused, frightened, curious, aroused, impressed, angry, and expressing any one of a number of other human emotions. Physically, they are just big blue humans with tails, and designed so that viewers can find them sexually attractive. If you don't believe that assertion, check out some of the more creative forms of modern adult entertainment, and you will see plenty of this particular modern incarnation of man's fall. Truly, the rapture cannot come soon enough. Socially, the Na'vi resemble a hippie commune, minus Bernie Sanders hanging around all day, doing no work, and occasionally talking politics to whoever happens to be in his orbit. Morally, and this is, I think, the most damning evidence of them as a noble savage strawman, they are basically perfect. They don't seem to commit in-group murder, at least we don't see this in the movies. They are unusually welcoming and tolerant of outsiders. They're nice. They help people when they can, for example, when they try to save Dr. Augustine, and they don't have any abominable practices that were practiced by ancient humans, such as slavery, human sacrifice, cannibalism, sexual and recreational torture of out-group members, power-based wife hoarding, the stigmatization of the disabled and deformed, enslavement of women as domestic beasts of burden, child marriage, and the extensive destruction of the natural world around them. And yes, that happened. The idea that primitive peoples lived at one with nature is a Western myth. Taking one example, the Maori of New Zealand, whose face tattoos were a direct inspiration for Cameron's Metkayina design. The Maori arrived in New Zealand around 1300 AD. They burnt vast tracts of forest in order to hunt birds more easily. By the time European settlement began in 1840, approximately 6.7 million hectares of forest had been destroyed by the Maori, but no such brutalization of nature by the Na'vi. Imagine how much more interesting Avatar would have been if the Na'vi did have some of these practices and humans were trying to get them to stop. If, for example, the Na'vi practiced religious human sacrifice, or in their case, Na'vi sacrifice, and Dr. Augustine and her assistants were trying to get them to end this practice, but were not able to get the Na'vi to understand why it is wrong. That would have made for a far more compelling story, and indeed a far more compelling Na'vi world than what we have, which is a world that has been so culturally and morally whitewashed that it is completely sterilized of anything that might have made it interesting. And that is the Na'vi problem. They are boring. James Cameron wants the Na'vi to be compelling and interesting ancient people, but he doesn't want them to have any of the moral deficiencies and cultural malpractices of ancient people that makes them interesting to a modern audience. He wants to have his noble savage and eat it too, but you can't do that unless you're the Aztecs, in which case you literally do eat noble savages after ritually murdering them. Hashtag cancel Columbus Day. Even the Na'vi phonetic system is entirely familiar to humans. The Na'vi don't seem to have much difficulty learning English, which suggests the Na'vi are equal to humans in intelligence. They can speak English perfectly well. They can operate human technology proficiently when taught. They are not more intelligent than humans because that would make them too great a threat, but neither are they less intelligent than humans, which would make them boring and not dangerous enough. The only thing that is truly alien about the Na'vi is their USB ponytail, which is admittedly an interesting aspect of their anatomy. However, it is weird that they use it both to control wild animals and during copulation. The Na'vi world is also whitewashed of the rampant death and disease that accompanied all primitive societies. There is no death in childbirth, no disease of any kind, no illness, no cancer, no chronic pain, no toothaches, no mental illness, no blindness, no cripples or people with any disabilities at all, either from birth or injury, no broken bones, no parasites, no life-threatening infections, no genetic conditions or debilitating deformities, no child mortality, no squalor, no starvation, and no brain conditions. There is not a single example of any of this in either movie, and it would have made for a much more dramatically and emotionally compelling story if these things had been a problem for the Na'vi. In the first movie, Jake says,
"There's nothing that we have that they want."
This is, of course, James Cameron speaking through one of his characters. Modern civilization, for all its technological and medical triumphs, has nothing to offer the superior civilization of the uncorrupted native peoples. Assuming, of course, that the term native people applies only to those who Western admirers consider primitive. The Irishman is native to his island, but cannot be considered a native person because he carries a smartphone and a can of Guinness, whereas the true native carries a bow and arrow, or at least wears something vaguely tribal looking in their Instagram photos. But what if, instead of a society of super beings immune to everything, the Na'vi had the same vulnerabilities and problems of us mere humans? What if many of the older Na'vi had cataracts and the humans promised to cure that and give them medicine to ensure it would never reoccur in exchange for a temporary evacuation of Home Tree? The humans even toss in an offer to exterminate Na'vi tapeworms and distribute penicillin, instantly decreasing Na'vi infant mortality by several 100%. That would have made for a better movie because now the Na'vi have a decision to make: cooperate with the humans, benefit massively from that cooperation, and also give the humans some of the things that they want. Or oppose the humans entirely, get none of the benefits that humanity is offering, and continue to suffer from the problems that humanity is offering to solve. Try giving a Na'vi mother with a sick, dying child a single good reason she shouldn't go to the human settlement where they will cure her daughter and send her home with a cute teddy bear to show off to her friends. There isn't one. Cameron is eager to attack and criticize the modern capitalist world created by Western and latterly Eastern innovation, but he will not give that modern world credit for its deific achievements in raising billions from poverty, suppressing and even eradicating disease, and destroying many of the evils that plagued mankind throughout history.
We like to say people kind.
Apologies, people kind. When in the first movie, Jake Sully says,
"There's nothing that we have that they want."
He sums up the Na'vi problem. They want for nothing. They have no problems. They are perfect, and thus unrelatable, unrealistic, and boring. No Na'vi Judas will ever emerge from the trees and offer to give up to the humans a band of insurgents in exchange for 30 pieces of unobtainium. No sick young Na'vi woman will ever go to the humans begging help. No Na'vi prince will ever conspire with the humans to make himself king. The Na'vi have all the positive attributes of humans: intelligence, language, beauty, community, compassion, and so forth, and none of our negative aspects. The Na'vis are not aliens. They are simplified humans, cleansed of all wrong and placed back in the Garden of Eden. For James Cameron, showing morally complex and realistic depictions of how intelligent individuals facing problems would behave is a problem, because to do any of that would be to suggest that modern, corrupt human society has anything to offer the unspoiled society of the noble savage that lives from the breast of nature. The last aspect of the Na'vi problem is culture. They don't have any. Art, architecture, the written word, poetry, storytelling, musical instruments, athletic competition, games, philosophy, painting, theatre, dance, gardening, landscaping, and interior design are all non-existent in Na'vi society. What exactly do they do all day? I know they hunt and fish and fly their dragons around and sleep and fuck, but how do they entertain themselves? What do they do in their leisure time? The fact that the Na'vi have no culture, that the reef people, the Metkayina, are linguistically, culturally, and in manner and comportment indistinguishable from the Na'vi, demonstrates just how two-dimensional this fictional race is. Cameron wouldn't need to do a lot of world building as it relates to culture. Just show a few kids playing a game, or the Sullys eating dinner around a fire while watching a mask play with the other aliens, or an old man playing a primitive string instrument and singing a nice song. Anything. Show any aspect of these people that could be described as cultural. Give me a reason to like them beyond they look pretty and they're really good at hunting, and isn't it terrible that the evil white people have come to steal their planet? It's not like the Na'vi are technically too primitive to have culture. They have nice clothes with intricate patterns, body decorations, jewelry, hairstyle, advanced bow and arrows, harpoons, canoes, fishing nets, saddles, intricate tattoos, and animal domestication. So why can't they have drums, dolphin races, competitive fighting, painting, archery contests, anything? The total absence of anything identifiable as culture from either the Na'vi or the Metkayina shows that Cameron is too focused on the exterior look and presentation of his world, and not enough on the internals of that world, although there are 4 billion reasons to suggest that James Cameron's way of world building is at least more broadly appealing than the culture-focused style of world building that I espouse. The similarities of the movie's dramatic beats to that of the original Avatar is also a problem. In both movies, the following happens. Jake enters the society of a foreign people. He learns their ways. He learns to ride a wild flying beast that resembles a dragon. He escapes a pursuing Korich. The humans destroy and plunder an element of the natural world considered sacred by the Na'vi, but which humans consider unimportant. The local Na'vi become enraged by this. Jake rallies Na'vi around him for a final showdown. Things go badly wrong in the showdown, but Jake's cause is saved by the intervention of Mother Nature, or Ehwa in the world of Avatar. All of Quaritch's forces are destroyed in a Pyrrhic victory for the Na'vi. A significant but not too significant character death occurs. Neytiri loses someone close to her, flies into a rage, and enters battle to seek revenge. There's a final boss fight with Quaritch. Quaritch seems to be about to win, but something intervenes to help Jake out, and Quaritch ends up losing. In both movies, Quaritch seems to be dead, but in both cases, we later find out that he is not really dead. Jake goes to the spirit tree, chills out for a bit, then wakes up. I don't accuse The Way of Water of being the same movie, just Avatar repackaged. It isn't, and I don't have a problem with some of the dramatic beats of the first movie being repeated. A movie franchise needs its leitmotifs after all. But The Way of Water follows too many of the exact same dramatic beats and plot points of the original Avatar, and in most cases does a worse job than the original. The final battle, for example, was much smaller scale and fought from much lower stakes, despite the presence of a gigantic human city in the movie. I'm now going to address Avatar's anti-colonial and environmentalist themes. To be clear, having a thematic agenda isn't something I accuse the movie of. It is an openly stated central purpose of the movie as stated by James Cameron himself. I'll start with the environmental message. Be nice to trees, be nice to water. They're nice messages, and you would be hard-pressed to find anyone who disagrees. Destroying forests is bad. Disney should not have butchered thousands of acres of pristine, wild Florida forest to clear the way for their monstrously ugly solar farm, built to increase their ESG score and thus keep BlackRock happy. Japanese fishermen shouldn't hunt whales. You hear that, Aussie Ahab? Take your whaling equipment, your sake, your anime, your panty dispensaries and your excellent video games and go back to Tokyo and get a job in an office or something. Okay? Stop hunting whales, you Japanese man. I have to say, the Japanese look very different in 2170 from what I would have expected, but then who in 1870 would have thought that the British would look like this today? The marvels of diversity. You see what I'm getting at? James Cameron's crude, blunt force messaging would be much better aimed at countries that are doing the most damage to the seas, such as China and India, and in the case of whaling, Japan. Instead, he decides to clobber a Western audience over the head with messages that we already accepted decades ago. Every single Western country opposes whaling and have laws and regulations in place intended to prevent it. Westerners on an individual level also regard whale hunting as very wrong. And yet, in Avatar: The Way of Water, the evil whale hunters are almost all white Westerners. The same criticism applies to Cameron's depiction of colonialism. Colonialism, as we think of it in the West, and certainly as it is taught in schools and universities, is a Western practice that took place mostly in the 19th and early 20th century. The reality is that colonialism is universal and was practiced by all empires that grew powerful enough to practice it. There is a reason Egypt today is inhabited almost entirely by Arabs who are not native to Egypt. The same goes for all of North Africa. More recently, Korea suffered horribly under Japanese colonization efforts. By the way, Japan, I don't mean to pick on you. I've been to Japan 3 times and I love the place. It's an amazing country and the Japanese people are very nice. The Indonesians slaughtered as many as 300,000 Timorians in their annexation and attempted colonization of East Timor. In 1971, the Pakistani military, aided by local militias, killed between 300,000 and 3 million Bengalis in an ethnic cleansing operation that was intended to make way for loyal settlers. Skipping ahead to today, China have sent an estimated 7.5 million Han Chinese settlers into Tibet to ensure that the area becomes as ethnically and culturally Chinese as possible. That is to say nothing of the human rights atrocities carried out against the native inhabitants of that land, or the concentration camps filled with Uyghurs in West China, camps which Disney thanked personally following their close and productive working relationship with the camp authorities. Colonialism isn't a sin of the past that we need to reckon with today. It is very much an ongoing crime in the modern world. But again, the evil human colonizers on Pandora are not from any of the nations that have made extensive colonization efforts over the past 70 years, and in one case in particular, continues to do so today. Almost all the colonists on Pandora are white Westerners, despite the fact that Western decolonization started immediately after World War II and was basically entirely finished by the mid-1970s. The last Western nation to make a major colonization effort was Germany, the victims of those efforts being Poland and the USSR. But we don't think of Europeans as being victims of colonialism, since they are neither noble nor savage, and therefore not worthy of our pity and condescension. Cameron's environmental and political messages could have been valuable if done properly, but the villains against which these messages are silhouetted come off as cheap strawmen. Cameron is not willing to suffer the political fallout that would result from a realistic depiction of his environmental and colonial criminals, instead preferring the safe option of going along with the white man bad trope. This lazy choice devalues the central themes in the Avatar story. This also partially answers why there aren't more human settlements on Pandora. Why are there only Americans here? Where are the Chinese, the Russians, the Japanese, Indians, Europeans, and possibly even the Koreans? Any space-capable nation would want to send ships to Pandora and take a slice of Pandora cake before someone else gobbles it up, especially since, as we are told in the movie, Earth is dying. The migration to Pandora would essentially be the scramble for Africa in space. But of course, that would tangle the movie up in all sorts of nasty political knots and take the focus off the Na'vi and back to the human world. Cameron instead chooses to keep things simple by making Pandora an exclusively American outpost where only America can do wrong. I'm prepared to accept the fact that only America is capable of making the journey to Pandora, since such interstellar travel would require vast economic and technological resources, but as a sci-fi fan, I do find it disappointing that neither Avatar movie offers an explanation as to why only America can make it to Pandora. And when it is stated in the movie that Earth is dying, you would think that point would be expanded on. Why is it dying? Where are the millions of refugees fleeing a dying Earth to get to Pandora while they still can? Are other countries planning on settling Pandora? Can the Earth be saved, or is its demise inevitable? None of this is answered. The death of Earth appears in a single line of dialogue and is never re-examined in the entire movie. Another weak aspect of the movie's sci-fi is the Korich Avatar memory upload plot device. That's just dumb. Uploading your memories and personality into a new body is such a tired, lazy sci-fi trope, and it doesn't work. The amount of memory required to contain all that data would be immensely vast. Also, that's just not how human memory works. The human brain isn't a hard drive that you can just upload and download stuff from. The movie, and this was actually a good decision, doesn't even attempt to explain how this memory and personality transfer would work. If it had attempted to explain it, it would just have dug itself deeper into this plot hole. There's no attempt made to explain it because it can't be explained. This whole memory upload device just felt lazy to me. That said, I am prepared to be wrong on this point. If you think memory and personality uploads will be possible 150 years from now, please explain why in the comments. With regard to the sci-fi aspect, there is a lot of potential which Cameron didn't explore, instead devoting time to the A Boy and His Whale movie. For example, humans have decided they need Pandora because Earth is dying, but humans can't breathe on Pandora. Now that doesn't mean humans won't still come, they will. They can live indoors and wear the breathing mask when outdoors. Not ideal, but it's a lot better than dying on Earth. But the breathing problem is one humans will have to deal with. A breathing mask isn't a long-term solution. One thing you could do is have humans genetically modify themselves to allow them to breathe the air. This would be a really fun plot element. Imagine a dangerous-looking military officer stepping out of a chopper, standing proudly in the dirt and taking a deep whiff of fresh Pandora air with no mask on, all while a shocked Jake Sully looks on from a hidden position in the trees. That would be cool, and it would really up the stakes. It would show the audience and demonstrate to the Na'vi that humanity is determined to live on this planet and will go to any lengths to make Pandora their home. It would also make humans less vulnerable to Na'vi attack and increase the incentive to humans on Earth to come out and colonize Pandora. But instead, we get Whale Boy and the Blue Planet documentary. The Way of Water is an enjoyable and at times very entertaining action war movie. Unfortunately, it is also a CGI nature documentary sandwiched clumsily between two acts of what should have been a brilliant movie. It's filled with plot holes, plot contrivances, one of the central characters is very poorly written and cast, it fails to improve upon the simplistic, idealized and unrealistic depiction of the Na'vi, its outdated themes fall flat, it sets up potentially very interesting plot points only to abandon them. It is teeming with lost potential and humanity as species so great that they have travelled to their neighbouring star are reduced to
the mantids.
The Way of Water could so easily have been brilliant if the same care and attention that went into the visuals had been applied to the script and story. Despite its very strong positive aspects, there are simply too many things wrong with this movie. I think that, in time, the positive audience reaction will cool, and, ultimately, Avatar: The Way of Water will come to be seen as a mediocre sequel. Please share your thoughts about Avatar: The Way of Water and my assessment of it in the comments. Thanks for listening, subscribe, and don't forget to upload your memories and personality into the like button.